We've got the latest from the NFL owners meeting, which happens to be taking place in our own backyard in Palm Beach. Right now, joining us is Barry Jackson, who is here to break down some of what Mike McDaniel had to say today in his basically two press conferences. Obviously, Mike, let me tell you what I loved about what he said at the owners meeting. While I think and have written that the joke on comparisons to Nick Sirianni and his hot seat were not very good, just from the standpoints we're talking about two completely different organizations, two completely different head coaches. Don't really see the correlation there. I do like the fact that Mike McDaniel acknowledges, respects, understands, relates to the fact that he is perceived on the hot seat. It's kind of reality that of the world that we are living now, Barry, where back in the day when I first started covering sports, head coaches at least got 4 seasons. Right now, you'll be lucky if you made 3, and some coaches don't even make it past 1. Ask Gerard Mayo and another of other head coaches. But there are other things that were said today, particularly Calais Campbell. He expects a decision in 2 weeks, which is when Calais is going to announce that he's going to either continue to play or he's going to retire. Calais Campbell is cherry-picking teams, and they believe that he will have an offer and a great opportunity here, but Calais is chasing a championship. Does he view the Miami Dolphins as a championship team? I also found very interesting, Barry, the fact that Mike McDaniel basically said, if not promised, that we're going to address this offensive line and defensive line. We're not done. We're not done. We shall address it in the draft. We've got a plan. Cannot divulge that plan, but we've got a plan. We've got contingency plans too, Barry.
As Omar Kelly might say, cannot divulge, will not divulge. But I was encouraged by a couple of things he said today, and you have to read the tea leaves as you often do with McDaniel, because bless his heart, but there are always a lot of words, and you have to look for the 2 or 3 that mean something. So in this case,
it's like 12 sentences. You got to put 3 together. They don't connect, but you got to find a way to put it together. But we have become experts at this.
Exactly. So with Calais Campbell, or Calamble, if we combine his names, what encourages me is that he suggested that he's probably going to play. He didn't come out and say that, but he hinted as such in terms of saying he still has a desire to play. He also said, I feel good about how it could play out. So he did not obviously assure he's coming back because he wouldn't know. And
that means we put respectable money on the table, Barry. That means we put respectable money on the table.
Yeah, and they have to, right? I mean, to try to think they could get away with a $2 million offer again, totally unrealistic. So I'm feeling somewhat encouraged about Calais, even though we both know he could easily go to Baltimore. I'm feeling encouraged just the way that McDaniel portrayed things today. Sorry, as the rain comes down in the background, if you hear background noise. So I'm encouraged by the way he portrayed things today, saying, I feel good about how it could play out. So that left me encouraged. I was also encouraged by the fact that he didn't rule out free agents, additions at defensive tackle and corner, nor should he. How could he possibly when they don't have nearly enough at those positions? And he mentioned free agency goes on longer than usual, which to me said, look, we are going to fill need positions that are not filled in the draft come May, June, and July. Greer has a history of doing that. The question is the caliber of players who will fall through the cracks and be available at that time, Omar. That's the issue.
Yeah, and I also found it very interesting that he talked about building through the draft and how the draft sets the culture, and we're going to have 17 players here, which are going to lay the foundation for the culture. And all along the while, my thought process was, bullcrap. One, young players, rookies, do not lay culture, do not lay foundations. What they do is they work hard and they're ignorant. They have no idea what they don't know, and they don't know anything. The veterans generally teach them the way. What I have noticed about this team is they're ridding themselves of veterans. They're ridding themselves of players who can teach you good habits or bad habits. That's also that you have a young, fresh, open-minded team. And he talked about competition is this is another bullcrap statement where he talked about competition is really going to decide. Everybody's going to compete. It's going to decide where people stack up in terms. I have no depth chart. I'm taking all my magnets off the wall. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, man, that's a load of crap. Because for 3 years, I don't think you've had 3 position battles. When I can name you the position battles on one hand, well, we got the backup quarterback spots, and Skyler eventually unseated Mike White. We've got Liam Eichenberg losing to Isaiah Wynn, but last year there was absolutely no position battle. He lost to Isaiah Wynn in 2023. Then we have Julian Hill taking over Durham Smythe for the number 2 inline tight end role. That was a battle. I think I'm pretty much done for battles, Barry, during the entire Mike McDaniel tenure.
Yes, he spoke today of competition, which is an easy word for coaches to use when they really don't want to divulge what the truth is. But the one player that he was asked about where it was telling that he used the word competition was Liam Eichenberg. And the question was asked to McDaniel today, I think, by Palm Beach Post, asking him, what do you think about all the fan hate toward Liam Eichenberg? Does that affect the organization? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Oh, you're right. It was actually Chris Perkins from your former Sun Sentinel colleague. And he said it's the nature of the sport you love, and it's the emotional drawing to a sport, so he takes no offense with it. He said it obviously doesn't impact anything that he and Greer do. But what was interesting about the answer about Liam was he said for him to be a starter again, he's going to have to be the best version he's ever been, and he mentioned there will be competition. So why this is newsworthy to me, Omar, is this. He did not say, we are bringing Liam Eichenberg in as our third guard and our backup center. He didn't say that, nor did he say he's a starter for this team, which you would say about James Daniels. So I think that clarified that in the back of their mind, they know that they could turn to Liam Eichenberg if they can find nobody better at guard to pair opposite James Daniels in these next 2 months. So I think this was preparing us for that possibility. The idea of Liam as a starter, it clearly has not been ruled out entirely. Now, will they bring in competition that's better than Liam? Certainly very possible. If they use the 13th pick on an interior lineman or a tackle who can move to guard, then obviously he'd be the front runner over Liam. But if the pick at 13 is not is not a lineman, if they go defensive tackle or safety or corner at 13, then to me, Liam still has a decent chance to start because there's no guarantee that any street free agent signed in May or June is going to beat out Liam Eichenberg because you're not talking about high quality players still left in the market at that time. So I think it's telling that McDaniel today said there is still a possibility Liam could be a starter, but there will be competition as opposed to just saying, he's a helpful player. He can fill in on a lot of spots. We foresee him as our backup, our number 3 guard and our backup center. He could have said that today and he didn't.
I don't think he could have from this standpoint. And I disagree with your statement that there aren't free agents out there that can unseat Liam. Dalton Risner could unseat Liam very easily. Will Hernandez could possibly unseat Liam. I actually like Jared Wilkes. I think he's an offensive tackle from Isaiah Wynn could unseat Liam. Let's be real about that. Isaiah Wynn is a better player than Liam Eichenberg. That's just facts. He's just
not as durable, which is a big deal.
Wes, you're right. You're less durable. Jedrick Wills, I think he can convert from a left tackle that he played to guard, just like Wynn did. But that's neither here nor there. There are still some decent free agents. A lot of them are aged. A lot of them want more money than they're worth. A lot of them are injured, like Wills. I understand where they're coming from. Their focus is shifted to the draft. They're going to try to address those positions. And then afterwards, they'll probably try to tackle what hasn't been addressed with free agents. And I think that's a beneficial thing to do. Is it going to be a healthy, productive thing for this team? I hate the fact, and I hate the fact, even though you badgered me to death about overspending money and making it rain on these mediocre offensive linemen. And I said, hey, we could have some patience here. I think there was an acknowledgement from Mike McDaniel very early in the first press conference that we built this thing wrong. We became very short-sighted, and this isn't quoting him. The way we attacked it this is now quoting him. The way we attacked it directly related to the lessons learned, both good and bad, in the 2 previous years. The vision I have for our team in 2025 that includes players on the upward ascension of development. And to me, that means we went old, we went injury prone, we were trying to patch the roster with guys that we paid premium money for certain players, and we were just filling the roster. And right now we need to put together a better roster to have a more sustainable success. I heard a shift in mentality and in focus. And I suspect that shift is caused by Grier finally stepping forward and saying, maybe the way we've been building it is wrong, Mike. Maybe the fact that you want to go trade your draft picks for George Kittles of the world isn't exactly the best strategy in the world, Mike. Let's hone in on young players and developing young players. But I make this argument to you, Barry. And I heard what Mike McDaniel said about, his 7 draft picks last year. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, who really contributed last year to tell you that they were just a rising star? People will argue Chop Robinson. I will tell you he's a one-trick pony. And Trick's pretty good, but one-trick ponies are very easy to defend. I can't tell you anybody who killed it last year from their draft class. Jalen Wright, Malik Washington, Patrick Ben Morris, Patrick Paul. Any names killing you right now?
No, I would say Malik Washington was probably the best value pick, being in the later rounds. It looks like you have a long-term returner there and a number 3 or number 4 receiver. And Chop Robinson, they appear to have gotten right. Give him credit. This was a rare instance in my mind where a player who has very unimpressive college stats is able to still be productive because he was drafted on traits. To me, there are a lot of players drafted on traits like Deion Jordan who simply never materialize. There are other examples, obviously, besides Chop Robinson where it works out, but I give him credit for that. Your point that you just made about them learning their lesson, I'm not convinced about that, and I'm going to tell you why. During Grier's postseason news conference, there was never this come-to-Jesus moment where he said to us, maybe I need to start paying more attention to the trenches. Maybe we need to de-emphasize the speed component of the team in terms of spending a lot of resources, allocating a lot of money and cap space toward players with speed, and instead building the best possible offensive and defensive lines. Did he ever say that? No. Did he ever say our approach to building the team was flawed? No. So that leaves me with the impression that while it was clear to anyone, including Helen Keller, that the offensive line was not good enough last year, I don't think there's been a moment with Grier, Omar, that makes me believe that his philosophy on team building has changed dramatically. Because if it had, we would not be sitting here talking about Liam Eichenberg with a 50-50 chance of starting again. We would not be sitting here talking about a roster that incredibly, it blows my mind. We're about to get into April, and they have one good defensive lineman under contract. One, Zach Sealer, a below-average nose tackle in Benito Jones, and 2 journeymen with Dickerson and Farrell. I don't want to hear about Dickerson and Farrell. It's like they're not even on the roster because they're journeyman borderline guys who's going to be on a practice squad. So if he had learned a lesson from this, then we would have seen all of these positions addressed earlier. We would have seen money thrown to Jonathan Allen from all the cap space they could have created by restructuring others. We would have seen a second guard added. If I told you today, would you feel the Dolphins would have a clearly better chance at a wild card if they had spent $7 to $10 million on Mekhi Becton, who obviously was a good guard for the Eagles after being a failed tackle for the Jets? He signed with the Chargers. If I said, would they be a clearly better team who would have a better chance of unseating Denver or the Chargers and beating out Cincinnati and Pittsburgh for one of those 3 wild cards, would you have said, yes, let's do it? Because to me, it comes down to decisions like that and Jonathan Allen.
I would not disagree with you, except for the fact I think Becton signed for like $10 million, Barry.
Right. But you could have created that. Restructuring Tua creates 19 right there. You could spend half on Becton, do a void year, and its cap it's only about $5 million.
Barry. Okay, it's a 2-year deal for $20 million. It's realistically about $10 million this year. He's going to make $10 million this year.
Okay.
in per game bonuses. Barry, I said this to you a month ago, and I do believe this. I don't want these guys building this team irresponsibly.
Well,
They're
what's
just
irresponsible about signing a guard who had success as a guard after being a
he's
failure
injured.
as a first-round tackle on a good team?
He's injured. I don't necessarily know if he's a scheme fit. They run inside and outside zone in Philadelphia, but he's a plotter. Not to say that I'm opposed to plotters, because I do like Booker from Alabama at pick number 13. Give me I'm not disagreeing. I'm not acknowledging that I think that they need some level of balance. Now, do they think that they need some level of balance? No, they don't. Here's the problem that I have. I don't want them making a mess for whoever's going to have to clean it up. And unfortunately, their history and their body of work have not proven to me that they can do well with what they have. They need to go spend and shop. And I'm sorry, sometimes you got to make a meal with some bologna and a bologna egg sandwich. And sometimes that's just going to have to feed you.
And they're doing that at safety, and they're going to end up doing that at other
positions. Doing a lot of positions.
Like 2 cheap safeties from Detroit and the Jets who have never been full-time NFL starters. So we'll see if they pick the right value guys. So much of this will come down to whether they pick the right value guys. There's one thing that you and some of the other writers are saying that I don't agree with, and it's this sentence. I don't want them to make things worse for the guys replacing them. The problem with that sentence is that kind of assumes that they're going to be replaced. I'm of the belief that they could go 7-10 again, and Grier is still the general manager next year. I really do believe he's GM for life. I really do believe it. I think the coach will continue to be replaced because that's been the history, other than Mike Tannenbaum. That's been the history with Ross, but you can see his allegiance to Chris Grier. There's never been a stronger owner GM allegiance that I've seen in my lifetime, except obviously Pat Riley, but that was thoroughly warranted because he brought him 3 championships. So I just don't see Grier fighting for his job. As I said on the podcast last week, that little snippet that you threw out on Twitter, Grier operates like a man who's not at risk of losing his job. And I think the reason is he's not at risk of losing his job from all indications.
What do you want him to do? Do you want him to be desperate? Do you want him to act?
Yes,
desperate?
I told you that before free agency. You had the ability to clear out $30 million more with Jordan Brooks, Zach Sealer, without them taking a pay cut, give Sealer a raise, and Tua. And you could have used that to sign established quality defensive tackles like Jonathan Allen, guards like Becton, or you could have gone Kevin Zeitler or someone like that. You could have filled all of these positions with established quality players. And the fact they opted not to says to me 2 things. A, yes, they're being financially responsible. B, Grier doesn't have a job to worry about. He knows he's GM for life. And number 3, they have supreme confidence in their ability to spot draft picks and bargains to be able to fill all of those needs. And they have confidence in some guys they drafted like Cam Smith and Liam. So those are the 3 reasons, I think, why we're in this position heading into April with still 7 or 8 major needs, dumbfounded that they haven't filled more of their needs. I think it's all of those reasons. And I wouldn't overlook reason number 3, Omar, about Cam Smith, because when Chris Grier loves a guy and drafts on traits, his thinking is, let's give him more time because it wasn't our mistake with evaluation. The coaches are simply not getting enough out of Cam Smith, and maybe the player as well. He obviously needs to be in better shape. So I think they just want to continue giving chances to these guys to prove that they were right.
That I don't disagree with you. All of the points that you made are very valid, except I will counter your points with this. When asked specifically about Cam Smith and Storm Duck, because Storm Duck was also included, I'm wondering why Ethan Bonner was excluded, since White Lightning is always raised by the players. He didn't mention them by name. Went out of his way to avoid naming them. And it's talking about competition, when you've never had competition around here. You don't. That's just the reality of what you've done. And it's an entitled organization where everybody's entitled to something. That has been the culture that you've created for the last 3 years. And okay, you can all of a sudden say, oh, everybody's going to have this competition. Everybody's going to have open competition. Like, did you feel like Devon Achane competed with Raheem Mostert in training camp last year? Do you feel like that was a competition, or that was just a seismic shift that everybody saw coming?
Yeah, I think it was clear he was going to be the starter. I guess competitions legitimate were Julian Hill and Durham Smythe.
Yeah.
Going into late July, either one could have seized the job, and Julian Hill seized the job. But there weren't a lot of those last year. We're on pace, Omar, to have more of those this year, because if they do not draft a safety at 13 with either the South Carolina safety or with Malachi Starks or Xavier Watt at 48, then you are going to have 4 young kids competing for 2 safety spots. So there will be competition in more spots. If they don't sign,
if you make that a competition, which history says they don't, they'll literally anoint a guy, and that's what it'll be.
I don't think it's going to be that case this year unless veterans emerge out of nowhere who are clear-cut starters that they suddenly sign on May 26th.
I give you a competition last year that didn't last very long. Tia Tart and Benito Jones, and that wasn't a competition. Benito outworked him. Benito practiced well. Tia Tart took plays and days off and ultimately got cut just because he didn't have the right makeup. Goes on and starts for the Chargers.
And plays better than Benito Jones. What an odd miscalculation. Now, I know you could say, well, it wasn't a great scheme fit. Maybe the motor wasn't running all the time. They clearly soured on him earlier. But the record shows that Tia Tart was a better player last year than Benito Jones, and they signed Benito Jones back for whatever reason.
But it wasn't amongst the reasons that I saw the work ethic for Tia Tart, and it was a hold your nose kind of experience. So I can't sit there and fault them for reacting to what they're seeing. Maybe the Chargers saw something completely different. Maybe the Chargers were like, we don't care. We'll put you on the Jordan Phillips lazy program. You can just show up whenever you feel like it and work whenever you feel like it, and we'll put you out there and you'll play. I don't know but that was a competition. But my point being, we're going from we're going to pay to build a roster to we're going to draft and develop players on a team that you don't draft and develop players. And it's supposed to all of a sudden magically happen, and we're supposed to get to 10, 11 wins and win a playoff game to save our job. I disagree with you. I do not think Chris Grier is here. I think as the GM, I think if anything, he's moved into another position and gets to finish out his contract. And ultimately, if I'm Steve Ross and I say, which I wrote in my story, that, just because I've retained, to paraphrase, just because I've retained these coaches or this leadership team does not mean the status quo will be tolerated. And if you flat out come out and say that, you cannot back off it and say, oh, well, it was the coach. And honestly, I think Mike McDaniel has done a far better job than Chris Grier has done in his role. I think Mike McDaniel has coached well or maximized the holes that this team had in 2023 and problems that they had in 2023 were obvious to everybody except for the individuals in charge. We saw the offensive line. We saw the defensive line. We saw the issues at backup quarterback. They didn't, but, and they excused it, and they turned out to be wrong. I love the Mike McDaniel line when we were talking about Liam Eichenberg. The same people crying and complaining for his job, I wonder what they'd say about me. And it is true. The same reaction is, and he's like, I love passionate fans because those are the people that keep me employed. Those are the people that keep the paychecks. And there is a need for Steve Ross to be accountable to this fan base. There is no possible way that they can sell tickets to the 2026 Miami Dolphins with Chris Grier still in charge if this team doesn't get into double-digit wins, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he's going to be back. And I want to push back on one thing you said. I do think they draft and develop guys. I don't think that's would be a clear new path. They did it with Rob Hunt. They did it with Christian Wilkins.
That was before him.
Javon Holland. The problem, Omar, is not that they don't draft and develop. They have had plenty of good draft picks, and they've developed them. Jalen Phillips. The problem is some of the best ones have left the building, and they've kept some of the worst ones. Channing Tindall, he's very cheap. He's here for a 4th year. Liam Eichenberg somehow is back for a 5th year. Cam Smith is back for a 3rd year, even though he showed nothing in the first 2 years. But Wilkins and Hunt and Van Ginkel all leave the building. Brandon Jones leaves the building. So too many of these young guys who they did develop well and draft well have left. I don't blame them for Rob Hunt because $100 million's a lot. I blame them a little bit for Wilkins. I blame them a ton for Van Ginkel because he would have been willing to stay and they got scared away by the Liz Frank injury. And I blame them for Brandon Jones because they should have invested the money in Brandon Jones, who was a good player for Denver last year, has improved in coverage, one of the best blitzing safeties in the league. They could have done that instead of trying to go the cheap route with Jordan Poyer. They would have been a better team, and they'd have a young safety under contract at reasonable money. So I quibble with that they can't draft and develop well. They can draft well at times. They can develop well. They just make bad decisions about what guys to keep and what guys not to keep. If I had told you that they would decide to keep Liam Eichenberg but not Andrew Ginkel, you'd say they need their head examined. And that's essentially what they've done. I know the money is different. I know Van Ginkel.
I said the same thing about Rob Hunt. The fact that you kept
I exclude Hunt just because the money was outrageous with Rob Hunt. And
$4 million is not outrageous. It's not. Well, it's not bad.
Total guarantee on Rob Hunt was one. Was what? Obviously, everyone sees $100 million, which will probably never.
Oh no, I'm not talking about Rob Hunt. I'm sorry, Rob Jones. Rob Jones.
Okay, yeah, Rob Jones. They had interest in keeping. I was told they had interest in keeping, but not at the money that Dallas gave him, which was above the minimum. It was clearly above the minimum. Yeah, so we should touch on Tyreek. Omar, before we go, as we look back at what McDaniel said today, and there was not a lot of news. We've given people really all of the highlights. Liam's going to have a chance to start. Calais, they're hopeful on, still waiting on a decision. Armstead, they think there could be a decision within a couple of weeks. They're not sure what he's going to do. Those were the big news points today. Also, he said Zach Wilson was their first choice. Big surprise. I'm waiting for the first coach to say, we signed the backup quarterback who was our 8th choice. We're just going to have to make do. Still waiting for the first coach to say that.
Listen, hold on. Let me defend that, Barry. Let me defend that on their end. I kind of do believe that he was the first choice because
I do too, because it happened quickly. They like the skills. I do too. I was making fun of our first choice. It's just like all the team press releases say the guy has successful arthroscopic surgery. Waiting for the first one that said it failed miserably. Sorry, guys.
I had one. I'll give you one.
One of those?
Buck Ortega nearly died on the table.
Oh my God.
Do you remember that?
I do. It's funny.
Nearly.
So tell everyone, Omar, about Tyreek Hill, what McDaniel said today, and your takeaways from that.
I felt like McDaniel I hate that you asked me for my takeaways because I can never clean it up for Tyreek, and I need to clean it up for Tyreek. When Tyreek sends out emojis on Twitter posts about him being traded, he's making a pay attention to me move. And then you see reports based on the emoji, which was a smiley face emoji about him being traded. Then you see somebody, I don't even know who, making a report that Tyreek would be open to a trade. Then he comes out and says, not true. And I'm thinking to myself,
he trolls on his terms. No one better troll him because then he'll set the record straight.
Yeah. And this was probably as close to a calling out of Tyreek Hill as the organization has gotten and probably will ever get. Because Mike McDaniel took subtle, covert little shots that says, oh, well, we know Tyreek's Tyreek's social media behavior. We also know that, if our team voted him a captain, then that would mean that we've seen him basically make a turnaround because, his teammates would have gotten over their disappointment with him. Then he says, basically, I need him to be the lead car in, that sets the tone, the pace setter, and these are all, I don't think it's fair to say Tyreek didn't do all those things last season because we watched, and I've seen the behind the scenes, Tyreek was frustrated all year with everything and hid that extremely well. If he was more of a poor teammate or a poor leader, he wouldn't have hidden it. Now, does Tyreek need to be a leader, a clear-cut captain, somebody that you look to set the pace and set the terms? No, because I just think there's maturity issues there that I don't think are going anywhere. But this whole theory and thought process that fans have of, oh, we could trade Tyreek for a draft pick. Let's just say, for poops and giggles, that Kansas City says, yeah, give us Tyreek, we'll give you our 32nd pick. What realistically do you think you're going to get with a 32nd pick, which is a first-round pick? There's nobody who's going to give you the 15th pick in the draft for Tyreek. And even if they had given you the 15th pick in the draft for Tyreek, what do you possibly think a Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State is going to do to replace Tyreek Hill?
Right. And people are unrealistic about thinking Tyreek's going to get a first-round pick. DK Metcalf, a star receiver in his prime, was traded from Seattle to Pittsburgh for the 52nd overall pick, and that's on the high side for what receivers are commanding now in a trade. Metcalf's going to have to be paid. Obviously, the skills he's in his prime. Unlike Hill, he's in his prime. So anyone who suggests the Dolphins are going to get a first and a third for Tyreek, it's ridiculous. So you're right. Let's just say argumentatively or arguably they receive the 50th overall pick in the draft. Not only is there nothing good that can measure up to Tyreek's ability, nothing comparable in talent and immediate production that you'd get at the 50th pick, but also keep in mind that you would be taking a big cap hit for Tyreek this year, and your cap hit for not having Tyreek would be higher at $28.7 million than it would be for having Tyreek. Plus, you'd have the cap hit, a modest cap hit of the guy that you take at 50 in this hypothetical example. So trading him to me would be absolutely ridiculous. The only justification I could make for trading him, I've written this a couple times this offseason, Omar, would be this. Come May or June, if you have an agreement with another team to trade Tyreek for a frontline starting guard or safety or maybe both, or a corner, someone who's already under contract but not a draft pick to execute after June 1st, that's the only thing I would consider. And the reason I would consider it would be this. You would be lowering Tyreek Hill's cap hit this year from $28 million to $12 million if you do it after June 1st. And also, you would get immediate help from a veteran starting safety, corner, or guard, maybe two of them in a multiplayer trade that would both lower his cap hit this year, help you this year. You wouldn't be waiting until 2026 draft picks. That would be the only logical way I could see them trading Tyreek Hill that would make any sort of sense.
Following your line of thinking, do you trade Tyreek for Trey Smith, the offensive guard that got a franchise tag from Kansas City, and then making him the highest paid guard in the NFL?
That's an interesting question. I would have to give that some thought. I would prefer to trade Tyreek for value established starters in their rookie contract.
You want that instantly?
Those are hard to find. And Miami might have to throw in a draft pick of their own to get that.
That instantly fixes your offensive line. Think about it. Kansas City did trade Latavius Sneed for the draft for a second-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's going to be interesting. If the Dolphins should happen to draft a receiver in the first round, which would be shocking because there's no one really projected for their range of 13. But if they pick someone at 48.
McMillan is going to be in there for 13. I think.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Burden obviously is no longer in that range.
You don't think so?
From all indications, no. I think there's going to be a run of offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, edge players in that range. The Shamar Stewarts of the world, I think.
Hold on, you think Burden is going before 13?
No, I see him going after.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't see him being.
McMillan is actually going to be in that realm of between 6 and 15.
Yeah, so he'd be the one option.
I think if a team might trade up for McMillan, I mean, it's going to be curious. We got a lot of time. There's a lot of players that could rise and fall in the draft process, so that's besides the point. But let me give you another trade scenario for Tyreek Hill.
Okay.
49ers for George Kittle. Straight up.
I would probably do it just to.
You got to make George Kittle the highest paid tight end in the league, though.
Yes, I would do it to try something. Obviously, you'd be playing with 12 personnel virtually all of the time.
You do,
but it would be interesting. You could get by with Waddle and Westbrook-Akine and Malik Washington as your receivers if you're putting out Kittle and Jonnu Smith together on 70% of your snaps. I think you could get by. I would do that just because I think it adds something and removes also. I don't want to say the Tyreek distraction because when he's on the field, he always gives full effort and he plays and he gives you great production. So I don't want to say this is like a Jimmy Butler thing because unlike Butler, Tyreek gives effort when he's on the field, unlike what Butler did in his last month as a Heat player. But I would try just because it would be something new. Trey Smith, I'm not sure I would do that. That would require some thought. But I think you're getting my drift about if you're going to trade Tyreek, do it for an established veteran or two in a post-June 1st trade so that it doesn't kill your cap this year. That's why you can't trade Tyreek for a draft pick this year, even if you got an offer of a high draft pick, which we don't think they would, because you'd have the cap hit of losing Tyreek. You'd be replacing him with a player who wouldn't give you as much this year. And McDaniel said today the plan is to keep Tyreek. I know some people were parsing words and saying, well, he said right now. That's just the way McDaniel speaks. It's the way McDaniel speaks. I didn't read anything into that.
It's the way all GMs speak. They're not going to give you definitive and then something happens.
Right.
And then,
exactly, because Mike does not want us to say to him later, you lied. He's one of the coaches with integrity where he doesn't like to lie to us. And so that's why I think he's being careful how he phrased it. But our expectation is that he's going to be back on the team.
Absolutely. I hear what you're saying about Tyreek. Here's my problem with the whole Tyreek narrative. While we know he's a distraction, we know he's immature. We knew all of those things before the organization even traded it and everybody in the media greenlit it as a great deal. So let's not have selective memory about who he is and how he conducts himself and what we got going on. Like we've had a legal incident every offseason and we basically looked the other way, all of us. So we know what we got in bed with. So don't be surprised when you get bit. On top of that, 1,700 yards for 2 straight seasons. That's not anything to be ignored. You see him now, anytime you see him, he's got on this ridiculous brace on. Clearly, the hand was an issue. The hand was surgically repaired, had to be operated on. It was something that impacted him all season. He admitted it multiple times, not using it as an excuse. He'd rather use the fact that his quarterback sucked, whenever he didn't play without Tua. But it was a factor. Why is it that we are immediately accounting for Tyreek never getting back to what he once was and not assuming that he can't use this as a motivating stepping stool to help him grow up and mature and deliver another dominant season?
No, I agree with you. I would gamble on Tyreek playing well this year, which is why I would not trade him for anything other than another elite player. And the Kittle thing that you presented, even though I would probably do it, I'd have to think long and hard about it. One of the appeals to me about the Kittle trade would be you'd be operating with a guy under contract. You'd give him a new contract that would extend for 4 years. So you would count on having Kittle on your team longer than you're probably going to have Tyreek on your team. So that would be one reason to do it, but I could make a case either way. But yes, I'm not giving away Tyreek.
Why are you thinking about dumping him? You just signed him, Barry.
Well, I mean, with the way the contract is structured, I would think you and I would be surprised if he's here in 2028. He might not even be here in 2026 or 2027, right? So,
I agree, yeah.
but I would not trade him for a draft pick. I would not trade him for a middling starter. I would want young, quality talent, clearly above average starters, or a comparable player to move him. If not, I just think you're taking a step back for no real reason to do it.
No matter what, you get rid of Tyreek Hill, you're going to take a step back. This offense revolves around him and the threat of him. I personally don't feel like Jalen Waddle is ready to carry that load, and they don't have enough weaponry offensively. I would see the whole offense become stifled if we did that. Another thing I wanted to get into before we break is he talked about Tua. One of the last questions brought up. It's funny that we've now had 3 media sessions with Mike McDaniels, and Tua is brought up in the final 5 minutes of the 3rd media session where Mike McDaniel said the hip injury was not something that related to what he suffered in college, soft tissue injury that just needed to heal. And then talked about, Tua understands he's got to do the things that he needs to do in order to stay available to his team. Tua has said that multiple times. The question is, how does it contribute to the playing time? Mike brought up, Mike talked about jujitsu. He was asked about weight loss and wouldn't really divulge the plans for Tua, as they never want to divulge the plans for Tua. Is there any fear in your mind associated with the fact that Tua has not stayed healthy for all but 1 year of his NFL career. And here we are, the whole season hinges on Tua staying healthy. Because Mike did bring up the point.
Of course there is, Omar, which is why I said all last summer, as much as we love the guy, as much as he's improved dramatically under Mike McDaniel, you don't commit long-term to him. And unfortunately, I don't want to say I was right. I hate to say I was right, but now they're facing the same issues that they faced every year except the 2023 season. A player who unfortunately seems predisposed to concussions, a player who cannot stay healthy, who has had 9 different body parts affected by injuries since his time at Alabama. The comments I took away today from McDaniel on Tua, Omar, were he has to understand the art of knowing when it's time to take a risk, and there is a very specific time doing that. So that said to me that they haven't told Tua, you can never try to escape the pocket, rush for positive yardage. There are times you can do it, but here's when you can do it, and here's when it's going to be not acceptable. Remember, Greer used the words, Tua not protecting himself and missing time is not acceptable to us. Those 4 words to me were the most shocking of the Dolphins offseason, because I never thought, after babying Tua for years and years and giving him his bottle and giving him a nap and burping him, I never thought they would put him on the spot by saying, this is unacceptable to us. And that to me was very meaningful that Chris Greer used those words. McDaniel today obviously always has a lighter touch. He just said he had to see last year the ramifications of his lack of availability firsthand. And the hope is that it resonates with Tua. I'm telling you what, if Tua makes the mistake that he did trying to do the tackle on the interception in the Rams game, or does
that was such a good,
then shame on him. And I'm a big Tua guy, as you know, but shame on him if he does this again. He cannot continue to put his team at risk.
Oh, we just let a guy return the interception back. I mean, that's my 6.
No, but don't tackle with your head. It's perfectly fine. You want to push him out of bounds if you break your arm. Okay, just do not tackle the guy with your head when you are predisposed to concussions from all indications.
Tua is not going to change the style of play, and he already told you that. And it is.
He's asking for trouble. If he's tackling with his head or diving head first and not protecting his head, he's asking for trouble, Omar. And it doesn't matter our opinion or fans' opinion on that. What matters is that the Dolphins have decided that's unacceptable to them. This is why it's interesting to see if they draft a quarterback this year, because the Dolphins have made it clear for the first time ever that Tua not protecting themselves is unacceptable to them. And how do we know that? Because Chris Greer literally used the words unacceptable to us.
Whatever. I will say that. I will say this. You talk about select moments. So is your team trailing by 20 in the second half, fourth down, scramble in the red zone to convert a first down? Is that an acceptable play? Because that's when Tua suffered a concussion.
It's for Mike McDaniel to decide with Tua what's acceptable and what's not. It's their rules to set, right?
I you know what? I support Tua from this day. I always support Tua. I did prefer fat Tua. I'm sorry, let me correct myself. I did prefer thickums. I did prefer thickums Tua over
not obese Tua, but slightly, okay.
More little huskier Tua.
Huskier, good way of phrasing it.
Yes, I did prefer huskier Tua. I felt like he could take more.
Girthier. It's a word. It's a new word.
We're not gonna put girth in there. Okay. Listen, on that note, we will be back later this week to talk more about what we've got the latest in Dolphins as they prepare for the draft. Thank you for watching Dolphins in Depth, and we will see you on a later note.